Hey, this is going to be commentary for chapter 43 of my book, Metadimensional, which you can find on Kindle or listen to for free as an audiobook, and the links are in the description. So chapter 43 is called Systemic Aversion. So if you've been following the book so far, you might like decide to think about this as follows. Like, I'm giving you an interpretation of reality where space is fundamental, which sometimes makes more sense or is more commonsensical to you, sometimes is less commonsensical to you, but ultimately it's an interpretation, and you can reach the same conclusions assuming or similar conclusion, or it is as useful to believe this, that experience is fundamental, as it is to assume that physicalist dynamics produce experience. It's just another way of looking at it, and sometimes it's nice, it's interesting, but at the end of the day, it doesn't reveal anything. How you choose to look at it, it's a matter of your personal belief, and maybe your belief is a belief that in physicalism is better. Maybe my belief is better, but it's just a question of belief. It doesn't change the underlying conditions of reality, or what reality is. But you see, this is where this notion of the blank gap changes things. So according to this theory, the blind gap, there's like this gap of the things that experience can change, but it cannot track in the wakeful world. It doesn't perceive the forms of its, like when it changes reality, it doesn't perceive forms that give it the feedback to know that it changed them. But it changed them nonetheless, and reality changes, and there are rules for that. Now, some of these rules are the laws of nature, and like, as in, these rules are generic for everybody, and we can test them. Some of these rules might be private, only affect you, don't affect others. That's where placebos come into play. But there's another axis where you can analyze these rules, and it is that whether these rules operate in the wakeful world, whether you can track them in the wakeful world, or whether they are purely experiential. There's a rule there, yes, but it never manifests in the wakeful world as a rule of anything physical. It is a rule of things that are experiential, but it never is physical. Now, if you believe in physicalism, you'd think that doesn't mean anything, because you think that everything experiential is produced by physical processes. And therefore, if there's a purely experiential dynamic, then it's also reducible to physical processes. So you can take out experience and get to that process and make it a physical process, like a wakeful physical process, a process you can measure with a physical, like through empirical findings, through objective observation of nature, something like that. That's what you'd think. But if you assume the latter, then you understand that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be that you can track down the experiential dynamic to something in the wakeful, empirical nature. And if it's not like that, then there are portions of wakeful reality, not of some kind of like of the shared wakeful reality, not some kind of private placebo-like effect, that you will never be able to document through or to track using physical means. The only way you're going to be able to track them is experientially. And this is something that this is the one option that science simply doesn't want to acknowledge, that some dynamics will never be able to be there are areas, I wouldn't say science, I would say empirical science, or naturalist science, or empirical, is finding it really hard to assume that there are things that it will never be able to explore, even though they are true, even though they are objective in a way. Now you'd think this is what this is just following the scientific process, the scientific method. It's just not. You can't investigate it using the scientific method. So science says, I'm not going to deal with that because it's not a valid topic of contemplation. But the thing is, that's not true. You have in science, in physics, you have physical randomness. Physical randomness is a process. Real randomness, is the process that is not traceable to any physical process. Like, you cannot explain how it happened. You cannot go back and see the reason why it happened. It is random. I'm talking about, let's say, the half-life of an isotope, or the location of a particle at a specific time. The exact location at the exact time. That's from. So physics has no problem with that. It has no problem saying, some things we will never be able to explain through physical deterministic processes or non-deterministic. They are just random. They are beyond what physics can explain. But they will not have it when they're talking about experience. When they're talking about experience, they say, there are experiential processes that we will never be able to explain. No, that's too much. I mean, of course, when I say it like that, you say they must be accepting it, but they don't, because it's an ideological decision. It's not like that theoretically that they couldn't be, but it's very inconvenient for physicalists to say, physical process, like physicalism is wrong. There are processes that show regularity, that can be manipulated and all that, but they will never be able to be manipulated through physical means. They just don't like it because it breaks their core assumption of physicalism. Of course, that's not an issue if you assume this theory, because you reject physicalism and you say, experience is fundamental, so there's nothing here. And on the other hand, the physicalist scientists would say, there's nothing. What you say, physicalist dynamics, like experiential dynamics that have no physical, wakeful, natural way of measuring, they don't exist. And then they get the double-slit experiment, which kind of shows that you get like an experiential dynamic, which is making the measurement, and it changes reality. And the only thing that happens there is the observation, which is a purely experiential thing. And then you came up with explanations like the many worlds interpretation of quantum fields theory, in which you have your experience splits into the different realities, but they ignore the fact that there's a story that experience follows. And if you were going to make a decision to do something and something else happened, that's not experientially viable. That's not what you experience. That's not what your experience wanted. So it's not a continuation of what you were. Someone who chose the other ways. When you wanted to go right, someone chose left. That's not you. That's someone else. I made some videos about that. So the blind gap is a bit of it takes some getting used to.